Okay, in this lecture we are going to look at Kim Addonizio's first poem for you. So I'll read it out loud and we'll answer some questions related to the poem and do a little bit of analysis of what Kim Addonizio, what her poem's all about. So I like to touch your tattoos in complete darkness when I can't see them. I'm sure of where they are, know by heart the neat lines of lightning pulsing just above your nipple. Can find as if by instinct the blue swirls of water on your shoulder where a serpent twists, facing a dragon. When I pull you to me, taking you until we're spent and quiet on the sheets, I love to kiss the pictures in your skin. They'll last until you're seared to ashes. Whatever persists or turns to pain between us, they will still be there. Such permanence is terrifying. So I touch them in the dark, but touch them trying. Okay, so very kind of, I would say, very romantic poem. We have some, clearly it's a very intimate poem about a couple who are, it sounds like, in a passionate love affair. The title of the poem we could look at, so first poem for you. So this is the speaker addressing some hypothetical you, probably their lover, and they're describing their feelings for this relationship. And since it's the first poem for you, it's not the last poem for you. It sounds as if this is maybe at the beginning stages of a relationship. Well, that's what it makes me think of. So maybe this is a couple who are involved in a very sort of romantic or passionate relationship, and then the speaker here is contemplating maybe a more long-lasting relationship with this person. So immediately, if we just look at sort of the basic how to scan a poem, one of the first steps that you can do is just to count the lines. Sometimes that's a clue as to figure out, what kind of poem it might be, since we know that certain poems have certain amount of lines. So we'll just say, we'll count them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So 14 lines. And it has a rhyme scheme or no rhyme scheme. So you can also highlight or look for a rhyme scheme if there is one. So we have complete, neat, of, above, blue, you, serpent, spent, kiss, persists, until, still, terrifying, and trying kind of are not quite rhyming, but close. So it looks like we have A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G kind of rhyme scheme. So 14 lines, a consistent rhyme scheme of 3 rhyming quatrains and one final couplet. It's also a love poem. So this makes me think that this is kind of a modern take on a sonnet, sort of like Shakespeare's sonnet or Spenserian sonnet. But this author is sort of reimagining that kind of genre, so a sonnet for maybe a little bit more sexual in nature. And I tend to read this poem from a sort of female perspective, but it kind of depends on, how you imagine who the speaker is. But Kim Addonizio is a female author, so maybe that's why I just assume it's a female speaker, but it's not necessary, I guess, to imagine that. Okay, and then We can sort of think about some of the symbolism. So we do have a lot of talk about tattoos in this poem. So possibly we could see, what do tattoos represent? What are the tattoos in that are described? What is the speaker trying to do with the tattoos? So she says, I like to touch your tattoos in complete darkness when I can't see them. So that's the first line with tattoos in it. I'm sure of where they are, know by heart the neat lines of lightning. So we know there's a lightning bolt just above, sort of where the heart is almost. That's what I imagine, and that's the pulsing of the lightning. Could be a representation of a heartbeat below the tattoo. And then there's the blue swirls of water on your shoulder where a serpent twists facing a dragon. So we have blue water, a serpent, and a dragon. And then the fact that she's trying to touch that tattoos in darkness doesn't really quite make sense until you read at the final lines, where she replies about that the tattoos seem to represent a kind of permanence, right? Tattoos are permanent on the body. It's a large, when you make a tattoo, you're making a commitment to that, having that ink on your body for the rest of your life, unless, again, you go through a very painful process of removal. So the tattoo is a very strong symbol in this poem. But then we have the speaker who she says, such permanence is terrifying. So she's actually quite intimidated or scared about that, the permanence of a tattoo. But she tries to touch them in the dark. So I touch them in the dark, but touch them trying. So that last word seems to really pop out. She's trying, she's trying to touch them and maybe trying, aiming, aspiring to permanence. So it's kind of a maybe a lover who's at the beginning stages of a relationship, maybe a little unsure about herself, or and then dreaming or thinking or imagining about a longer commitment of permanence with this person who she's involved with. And she's touching the tattoos because that's what they represent to her, is a more, a long lasting commitment, a permanent commitment with this person. And then you can sort of read into the individual tattoos themselves. There's lightning, there's a dragon, there's a serpent, there's blue swirls of water. Like, I don't quite know myself what those things could possibly represent. So you could really read into and make interpretations. The lightning above the heart or above the nipple could be sort of a sexual image, or it could be a sense of power. Lightning could be related to, any number of things, kind of electrical, a spark between these people even. The dragon and the serpent facing each other. It's sort of, they sound, or it seems like, I don't know, a serpent versus a dragon. It could be a battle, or it could be sort of they're entwined with one another. So it does have connotations either of like of passion maybe, or an adversary, either some sort of interaction between two creatures. And they're the couple sort of making love, and then she kisses the pictures in his or the skin of her partner, and it's part of their romantic connection is this love of the other person's tattoos, and what they represent for her. So this is definitely a love poem, not a traditional one though, just because I think it is, a little bit more sexual, I guess, than more traditional love poetry. And maybe just because I imagine it to be more of a female speaker, I think that's also in itself kind of makes it a little bit more modern, less traditional, because usually you have like a male speaker. But that's not necessarily the case. It's just how I read it. And then you can sort of read into the kind of relationship that these two people might have. So it doesn't sound like these two people are married yet, just from this idea that permanence is somewhat terrifying to the speaker. You think about marriage as a permanent commitment, right? You make that commitment on the wedding day from death till death do us part and sickness and in health, all that stuff. But it sounds as if this speaker is a little bit scared of that lasting commitment because she says, they'll last until you're seared to ashes. Whatever persists or turns to pain between us, they will still be there. Such permanence is terrifying. So she's a little afraid of maybe commitment, and she's not sure where this relationship will go, right? She says whatever persists or turns to pain. She doesn't know if it's going to last or if they'll break up. Um, they just seem to be at a place where maybe they've been dating and they're deciding whether or not they're going to make a more permanent commitment to one another. So that's we can sort of definitely read into the kind of relationship that's going on in this poem. And yeah, the placement of the tattoos, even there's one on the shoulder, one up sort of above the heart. They're on top of the skin. So there is sort of a sensual thing about tattoos, especially in this poem, and how they're a connection with another person, or she's trying to touch them and sort of connect with the other person. And in a way, the tattoo does become a kind of, it's almost more permanent than any relationship is, just for the fact that you get a permanent something on your body that's going to be there till the end, and you know for a fact that it will be there. It's not going anywhere. Whereas, a human relationship is a lot more sort of tenuous and unpredictable. So you never know when you get into a relationship whether or not it's going to last. You hope for the best, but sometimes relationships break apart or turn to dysfunction. So it is always a nerve-wracking thing when you fall in love with somebody and imagine that this person could be the one. So I think that's what this speaker is going through, some of that apprehension and fear about making a stronger commitment. So we can also look, so we've talked about symbolism um, and imagery of the tattoos, but you could sort of look for some other ideas related to maybe conflict, like is the speaker conflicted at all? Is it an internal conflict or an external conflict? That kind of thing. But basically, I think we do have a strong symbol in the tattoo. We have a sort of thematic uh, idea of permanence, and we have ideas of conflict and relationships. And we know this is kind of a sonnet structure, so it's not a really traditional sonnet, but it's still going to represent the theme or the idea of love in a kind of new way. So that's basically Kim Addonizio's first poem for you in a nutshell. And if you wanted to talk about this one, there's lots to talk about if you want to write about this one. But you could look for some of the other kind of literary devices being used. She does tend to sort of run her lines, like she doesn't finish a sentence on a line. She kind of what we call enjambment, so she kind of runs them over onto the next line. So that kind of thing. There's definitely a rhyme scheme. And then that last word trying is very, if you were just going to look at the diction of the poem, that would also be something that really pops out. So that word trying there, sort of set out on its own, seems to imply a lot, like there's a lot of strong meaning behind that word in relation to the theme of permanence. So if we were going to answer the question, how do we interpret this poem, you would have to address somehow, what that speaker is trying to do. So what is she's trying to touch the tattoos, obviously, but what other meaning can we imply in her attempt to touch tattoos in the darkness? Um, in terms of imagery, obviously we have the depiction of a lot of tattoo imagery, but there's also this idea of darkness. Darkness. She's in the dark. Uh, so she likes the darkness does imply a kind of hidden quality, like something that she wouldn't do in the daytime, but she would do it in the dark. So there is almost like this, you know, she's not completely comfortable or confident about taking these actions during the daytime, but this is something, maybe a desire as it comes across at nighttime when this couple is intimate, and their relationship sort of moves or is progressing towards a more permanent or committed status. So it's an interesting kind of poem. There's some metaphors in there as well. So she says the tattoos, they'll last until you're seared to ashes. So, literally, I guess it means until you're uh, dead. But, she's using a very sort of strong language there, seared to ashes, to convey that. And yeah, so you could just, if you were writing about this poem, you could talk about it maybe 4 lines at a time, or you could, organize your paragraphs by symbolism, theme, and diction. So pinpoint what exactly it is, what, 2 or 3 things you want to talk about in this poem, and convey the sort of overarching meaning by talking about, symbolism, theme, conflict, those kinds of things. So it's sort of up to you how you organize your poetry essay, but I would say focus on 1 or 2 or 3 things at most. Don't try to do everything in your essay, and try to give some strong structure to your paragraph. So if you're going to choose to write about symbolism, uh, do 1 full paragraph on symbolism, and then don't jump around between points if you can help it. But other than that, I think this is a really sort of romantic poem and kind of a different take on a love sort of sonnet than we're used to.